Welcome to today's Explainer. Have you ever just stopped for a second? Stopped to look at the roads you drive on, the schools you attend, or the laws you follow every single day, and wondered exactly how it all gets organized? Honestly, it's a monumental task, taking millions of individual people with entirely different wants and needs and somehow organizing them into a functioning society. It's mind-boggling. So today, we're outlining exactly how governments are structured, where they draw their immense power from, and how that power has evolved over thousands of years, from the hands of absolute kings right down to the everyday citizen. To really wrap our heads around this, let's look at a surprisingly ancient blueprint. Long before modern democracies were even a thing, the ancient Indian scholar Kautilya laid out a remarkably modern definition of a ruler's job in his text, the Arthashastra. He emphasized three core things: protection from external threats, maintaining internal law and order, and absolutely safeguarding the welfare of the people. And you know what? No matter what kind of government you live under today, these are still the fundamental benchmarks for success. Here's our roadmap for today. We'll be covering the role of government, core principles of democracy, different types of democracies, early historical republics, and finally, monarchies and royal rule. Let's jump right in. Section 1. The role of government. So, to truly understand the complex machinery of a massive nation-state, let's just shrink it down for a minute. Imagine your local school needs a committee to handle its day-to-day operations. We're talking timetables, sports events, managing the midday meals, balancing budgets. It's a lot of work. How do you decide who actually wields that kind of authority? Well, you really have three options here. Option 1, every single student in the school takes responsibility. That's pure chaos, right? Option 2, the head teacher just dictates who's on the committee. That's authoritarian and pretty exclusionary. Which leaves us with option 3, the democratic path, electing trusted representatives to advocate for specific needs. And that brings us to a crucial concept, the representative. This is someone who bridges the gap between individual voices and collective action. By choosing one person to speak for a larger group, you maintain the voice of the people, but without the total paralysis of having everyone shouting over each other just to make a single decision. Now, what's really wild is how these exact same principles scale up from a simple schoolyard to a sprawling nation. We aren't just talking about writing rules anymore. We're talking about building massive national infrastructure, like highways and railways. We're talking about securing borders with a military, managing a complex national economy, and running postal services and courts. This brilliantly illustrates the true anatomy of government power. To manage a whole country efficiently, power is almost always divided into three specific functions. You need a legislative body to actually create the framework of rules. You need an executive body to implement those rules and administer the country day to day. And finally, you need a judicial body to step in, ensure the rules are being followed fairly, and resolve disputes. It's a balancing act. Section 2. Core Principles of Democracy. Having nailed down those basic functions, let's look at the foundational ideals of democratic rule. This is the system where the ultimate source of all this power is you, the people. For a government to legitimately claim it's a democracy, it has to strive for some core principles. Equality, meaning everyone has equal access and faces the exact same laws. Freedom, allowing citizens to express opinions without fear of retaliation. Representative participation, meaning every adult has the right to vote, which we call universal adult franchise. And crucially, an independent judiciary to ensure the government itself follows the law. Now, these ideals definitely take time to perfect. To put that into perspective, Switzerland didn't grant women the right to vote until 1971. Meanwhile, India had universal franchise right from its birth as a republic in 1950. But imperfect or not, these principles form the absolute bedrock of any system aiming to put power in the hands of the ruled. Section 3. Different types of democracies. Okay, so let's see how this actually plays out in the real world. Because even among democracies, there is absolutely no one-size-fits-all approach. First off, we have to distinguish between direct and representative democracies. A direct democracy, like certain systems used in Switzerland, gives citizens a direct say in passing specific laws and regulations. It's exactly like our school example where everyone gets a vote on the timetable. But for massive, highly populated modern nations, that's just way too slow. So they rely on representative democracy. You elect leaders to do the heavy lifting of governing, but the absolute key requirement is that those leaders remain entirely accountable to the public through regular elections. Take a look at the Indian Parliament. This perfectly captures a specific type of representative democracy, the parliamentary system. In this setup, the people who implement the laws, the executive branch, like the prime minister and their ministers, are actually drawn directly from the legislature. They physically sit in the parliament, and they can only stay in power as long as they have the confidence and support of that legislative body. Contrast that with a presidential system, like you'd see in the United States or South Korea. In the US, the president, the executive, is elected completely separately and works independently from the legislature, which they call Congress. Meanwhile, countries like India and Australia use that parliamentary system we just talked about. But notice the one constant bridging all of these systems together: an independent judiciary that is entirely separate from both the rulemakers and the rule enforcers. That separation of power is absolutely vital. Section 4. Early Historical Republics. You might think voting and electing representatives is a pretty modern invention, something born out of the last few centuries. But history tells a totally different, fascinating story. Back in the 5th and 4th centuries BCE, places like Rome and Greece had voting. And right around that exact same time, India's Vaji Mahajanapada was operating as an early republic. The Lichvi clan there practiced collective decision-making and actually elected leaders based on merit rather than just birthright. Fast forward to the 10th century CE in Tamil Nadu under the Chola period, and we have inscriptions detailing a local election process using sealed ballot boxes. They even had strict rules for removing corrupt officials. The common voice has always had power, long before the modern era. Section 5. Monarchies and Royal Rule. Finally, let's explore how power functioned back when kings and queens ran the show. Even in massive empires where kings held immense power, they were rarely meant to rule with unchecked ego. There's this incredible 17th century Rajput painting that depicts a famous scene from the Mahabharata. The wise elder Bhishma, literally lying dying on a bed of arrows, is teaching the future king Yudhishthira about governance. And his main point? He explicitly warns that a king must never get attached to power. His authority is entirely temporary, and his absolute highest priority has to be the welfare of his people. That profound lesson is beautifully echoed in a 12th century historical chronicle from Kashmir about King Chandrapita. So the king wanted to build a grand temple, but a poor cobbler refused to give up his tiny hut, which stood right on the way. Now, instead of using his royal army to just crush the cobbler, the king actually admitted his builders were wrong. He went directly to the cobbler and respectfully asked for permission. The cobbler praised his humility, noting that the misery of losing your home could only be described by a god or a king who has lost his kingdom. It's a stunning story of an absolute monarch recognizing the property and dignity of his lowest subject. These stories brilliantly highlight the ancient Indian concept of Raja Dharma. It goes to show that even absolute monarchs, kings who technically had the military might to do whatever they wanted, were culturally and morally expected to serve their people, not subjugate them. True power wasn't viewed as the ability to dominate. It was the responsibility to protect and to ensure fairness. Fast forward thousands of years, and oceans away from ancient India, we have U.S. President Abraham Lincoln famously defining democracy using these exact words. But when you really think about it, that underlying sentiment isn't all that different from the ancient ideals of Kautilya or Raja Dharma, is it? Whether it's a king guided by ancient texts or a modern elected president, the ultimate, universal goal of any legitimate government is to exist for the benefit of the ruled. Which brings us to a final thought for you to take away from today's explainer. We've seen how power scales up from a simple classroom to a massive country, and how the ideals of public welfare have remained remarkably constant from ancient kingdoms all the way to modern voting booths. So, as you look at the elected representatives and leaders holding power in your country right now, ask yourself, do they treat their power as a temporary tool granted for your welfare, or are they ruling only for themselves? Keep that in mind the next time you head to a ballot box. Thanks for joining me today, and as always, keep questioning the world around you.